Emotions are expected to run high today as the ANC's National Executive Committee meeting comes to a close. One of the important issues being discussed were calls for Ace Magashule to step aside. To tell us more about this matter, we're joined by Newzroom Afrika's politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa. Sbu, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a matter that we're seeing and reading of. The operative word here being emotions. Emotions running high, the details and the clashes, and of course the step-aside rule being something under the spotlight today.
Yes, that's correct. I think that's a correct characterization, Paul. For the simple reason being that, it's not easy for anybody to step aside, but we do know that the ANC has already taken a decision in this regard, because most people seem to think that it's only today that the ANC will be deciding on whether its members or its Secretary General should step aside or not. No, that decision was taken at the last NEC in February. What is meant to happen today is that they were meant to, the matter was referred to the panel and also the top six to finalize. There were a few outstanding issues for things like what happens to a member of parliament when they have to step aside from parliament, what happens to their seat. So it's things like that that they had to clarify. But today is the main day, because top of the agenda today is the presentation of the reports by the Integrity Commission, with the head of the Integrity Commission, George Mashamba, being the number one speaker on the item. So it will be an emotionally charged day, and I do expect that at the end of the day, as we've seen in recent NEC meetings, we'll probably get the closing address of the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, being open to the public, Paul.
Sbu, here, regarding, you saying today is a big day, emotionally charged, do you think we'll get a resolution today? Will there be a way forward by the NEC? Will they table something of substance today, do you think?
There has to be a way forward, Bushe, because as I say, today is not to decide whether the step-aside guidelines are accepted or not. That has already happened. They have been accepted. So and from the last NEC meeting, when President Ramaphosa closed that meeting, he reiterated the message which is required of the step-aside rules, which says that all those who are charged of corruption are asked to follow their conscience and then step aside voluntarily. Now, nobody has done that. We know that Ace Magashule is not willing to do so. He's come up with every reason why he would not do so. So do not expect that today he'll suddenly say that he accepts the step-aside rule and is willing to step aside, because he also disagrees. Him and his supporters also disagree as to how the process should unfold. Here is an example. They are saying that a leader of the ANC, like as ex-secretary general, is elected by the branches at conference. So he believes that it's only the branches that can remove him. But people, if you read the ANC's constitution, it's quite clear, it says, argued by his detractors, that actually the NEC in between conferences is the highest decision-making body. So there's no need for the NEC to defer back to the branches, because branches can only come together at conference when they are called, be it a special conference or be it an NGC. So there will be that contestation, but I think what we expect to hear today is the ANC, because remember, this thing has spread for so long, and in the process, President Ramaphosa has been cast as the weak leader who is decisive. So this is his moment. The guidelines have been accepted. So now what we would expect to hear is the matter of when is the Secretary General of the ANC, along with other members of that NEC, who have been asked by the Integrity Commission to step aside. Just an example, Butle, we do know that the Deputy Minister of Finance is one of those people. So it's not just Ace Magashule, it just happens that he is the highest ranking member by virtue of his position.
With Ramaphosa being regarded as this weak leader who's been indecisive during this process, what do you then imagine to be the outcome should, for instance, Ace Magashule be asked to step aside? What then would be the ripple effect when it comes to his political career? If we look back to what happened to former President Jacob Zuma, in fact, his stardom rose after the controversies.
Look, I don't think the two men are different. Their circumstances may be similar in terms of them facing charges. But I mean, in terms of the discussions I've been having, just chatting to different politicians and analysts, it's quite clear that part of Zuma's popularity had to do with a distaste, if I may say, for lack of a better word, or actually as a revolt against President Thabo Mbeki, who was seen to be strong and firm and had alienated a lot of people. And that template doesn't quite fit in this format, because if anything, if South Africans and members of the ANC are calling on the ANC to clean up its act, because the party has become a party of corruption, if I may call it that. It's a party that has become synonymous with corruption, and this, the party has admitted itself. If you recall last year, when President Ramaphosa said that the ANC is accused #1 in corruption, and that is true. If you listen to the evidence before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, every other day we hear of evidence of an ANC leader being implicated in corruption, or monies flowing from the states to private companies and then channeled to the ANC for one reason or the other. So two things will probably emerge from this. If Ace Mashashule steps aside or is suspended, obviously he will use the opportunity to try and mobilize support. But I do not believe that you can compare him to a Jacob Zuma, because I don't see the kind of traction that we saw when Jacob Zuma was fired. Because when Jacob Zuma was fired as deputy president, the first thing he did was to address a May Day rally of COSATU. I remember this was in 2005 in East London at Sisa Dugasha Stadium, which I had attended as a young journalist at that time. There was mobilization, there was a coalition which included the ANC Youth League, which we don't have now because we don't have an ANC Youth League in place, a COSATU now, which does not support Magashule, or an SACP. So there would need to be a bigger body of individuals and organizations who would be backing him for him to be strong enough to mount a campaign against the current president. But I think it would strengthen President Ramaphosa's hand, on the other hand, because he has been seen as this indecisive and a weak leader who consults too much. Perhaps when this decision is taken, there are some people who start to see some kind of method in the whole madness that is happening currently in the ANC.
Now, Sbu, if Magashule, as he's already done, challenges this ruling, if they say today he is suspended or forced to step aside, what then? What does the NEC then, what vehicles do they have to challenge that?
Look, in terms of a process, one, Buhle, is that he's asked to step aside. If he refuses, the ANC invokes its constitution, Rule 25.70, which deals with issues of suspension, that such a member will then be suspended. But he can still, from my understanding, having seen some of those guidelines, he can still appeal that suspension. But what would that then mean is that the NEC would have to come up with some committee which would hear his case. But that's not while he's in office. He would have stepped aside already. So remember, the main issue here is whether Ace Magashule remains in office while he is fighting a corruption charge. So internally within the ANC, there is that mechanism. But also, if he is suspended, that automatically kicks in, what automatically kicks in are disciplinary processes. So obviously there would be a committee that sits and goes through that to give him a hearing. But also, quite important, and also for the viewers, is that there is an issue that has been raised by supporters of Ace Magashule, and it's quite a valid issue, which says that sometimes some of the legal processes drag for years, 5 years, 7 years, and then someone is acquitted, but then they've been raising the issue to say that it is unfair for such a person to be stepping aside all along. But now, the committee that is headed by Kgalema Motlanthe, the former deputy president, that was a panel that was meant to come up with the guidelines. One of the interventions and the recommendations that they are making there is to say that if you are suspended or been asked to step aside, what the ANC can do is that every year your suspension will be reviewed. So which means that the party can sit and say, okay, you've been out of your position for 2 years. This court case maybe is not clear, maybe it's weak, as things progress, and then change that decision. So those decisions will still be subject to review, Buhle.
Now, very lastly, before we let you go, as we get into the crux of the matter here, we're also learning and hearing that the bringing the ANC into disrepute has been a word that's been repeated, well, a sentence that's been repeated a lot throughout this process. What does this now mean for the ANC as a party? The outcome of this decision, how important is it for the ANC as a party, its positioning, and the messages it's sending to its supporters? I mean, we also here referring to the Joel Netshitsenze, who is set to, according to insiders, according to the Sunday Times, he's set to have spoken out against Magashule, lashing out at him for a manner in which he conducted an interview where he essentially said that MPs did the right thing by refusing to sleep with the enemy when it comes to Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane.
And actually, talk of General Chitenza, Mpo, it's not just what he said in that meeting, which is alleged. It's what he wrote publicly. He penned a piece last week where he was critical of he raised the very same things, even arguing that there seems to be some insurgency, if I may call it that, or revolt that is being brewed from the Ace Makashule's office. And this is a sentiment that we've had for a long time, where ANC leaders have been asking as to what is the role of someone like Karl Niehaus in Makashule's office. And Makashule has refused to answer that question publicly. He's been asked this question even by journalists. And ANC members who believe that Karl Niehaus is leading or is part of that faction that seeks to undermine the ANC. Going back to your question as to what does this mean for the ANC, remember that the Ramaphosa presidency, when he came into power, he was meant to be this leader who brings this new dawn, which is meant to be the reimagination or rebirth of the ANC, an ANC that steers away from what it is currently, which is a party of corruption. He was meant to clean up. So for the broader public and from observers, such a decision would be seen to be as ANC finally taking a firm stand on issues of corruption, because they have spoken about this for the longest time. You can go back all the successive conferences. I can still from Stellenbosch in 2002. The ANC has never failed to characterize the issue of corruption. Every conference, they know what is wrong with the party, but what we have not seen is the party doing something about that. So if the ANC finally takes action, not just against Ismail Khashule, but any other leader, including Zandile Gumede, who's facing charges of corruption, then you would be able to say, perhaps South Africans would be able to say that perhaps the ANC is turning that corner.
Very well, let's leave it there for now. Newzroom Africa's politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa, giving us a sense of the big political stories of the day. Of course, all eyes on the ANC NEC outcome, that big decision on ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule.